Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 260. And if you are any good at all at maths, you may realize that 52 times 5 is 260. So this is our 5th birthday episode, which both Pete and I are very, very happy to have reached this milestone. We want to thank each and every one of you who watches and listens and comments and subscribes and reviews us and all the rest of it that's helped us get this far. And we also want to thank every single one of our guests over the last 5 years for helping this podcast become what it is becoming. We have got a great guest with us today. We've just been talking and it's a really special, it's the 5-year anniversary, and this is going to be really interesting, this podcast, for lots of people listening. I will touch on that in a minute. First of all, I'll say hello to Mr. Peter Lant in Bath, Somerset. Happy 5th birthday, Pete.
Happy birthday, James. Should we sing the song and everything? Look, I've even got my, got this up for the celebration background.
Okay. And if you are listening on the day of release, it's the 22nd of August. So we are well and truly kind of in the middle of the kind of summer holidays in England. And you may be listening.
How was your holiday, James?
It was lovely, thank you.
We've both been on holiday, haven't we?
We have. You may be listening to this on holiday somewhere. You may be listening to this in the garden, But yes, thank you for helping us get to this point. Now, we are rejoined today by Dr. Nancy Allen. Hello, Dr. Nancy. You okay?
Peter and James, I'm absolutely delighted to be back on air with you live. It's an absolute joy. Really enjoyed recording the previous podcast, and I'm back for more. So I believe you've got some questions lined up from your listeners.
We have indeed. I will just say, if you haven't listened to Nancy's first episode, that was episode 249. So it was about 3 months ago when the last episode came out. And I'll just give a plug at the start. If you are on Instagram, you can go to @gpdirectonline.co.uk on Instagram. And that is where Dr. Nancy Allen is on there. We had a great episode last time. So if you do want to go back, we did quite a lot of talking around dementia last time. It was a really interesting podcast. We had lots and lots of good feedback. So we've got Dr. Nancy Allen back on with us. And we also did Pete, I should say, did like an Excel, I'm terrible with technology. Is it an Excel spreadsheet or something?
It was a Google form.
A Google form. Okay.
Same thing.
Google form. And we got some questions come through to speak to Dr. Nancy about today. But before we go into questions, I think Nancy's just mentioned to Pete that since our last podcast, where Dr. Nancy Allen was talking about the importance of tracking your biomarkers, and Nancy was talking about the rings that you can wear that sync with an app on your phone. Pete went out and bought himself one of the rings. Yep. And he's holding up his middle finger. But Pete went out and bought one of the rings. And yeah, you're enjoying that, aren't you, Pete? Tracking on there.
I'm loving it. Yeah. No, honestly, it's quite addictive. Every morning I get up and I'm like, how was my sleep and all of that? But I did. I sent the link to Steph as well. So I don't know if she bought one. And Elise, who came on the walk with you guys as well. So so a few people have asked, because it's weird with these things, because people don't know what to get, because everyone says, oh, have you got an Aura ring? And I'm like, no, it's not, because they're 350 quid and you have to pay for the app as well. Whereas this was, and I know you can get them really cheap now, but this was 35 quid off Amazon.
Well, the last I checked on Amazon last week, it was down to £16, but I haven't tried that particular one. The one I wear is just £30 off Amazon.
Yeah,
it's so
people have asked me which one it is, and I'm like, it hasn't got a name. They're just quite generic, aren't they? But I mean, the technology's all there now. Yeah. Somebody did complain about this one in the comments on Amazon, because you had to charge it up every 5 days instead of once a week. And I'm like, if they can get a battery in there that you can charge up, I'm happy with that. Have you seen the size of it? It's tiny.
Excellent. So I suppose then, Nancy, should we just crack on with some of these questions? There is a bit of a theme around quite a few of them, and obviously, we were just talking before coming on. I had a full kind of blood panel done recently, a blood test that I did privately for things like it's got all the cholesterol, testosterone, PSA on there, and we'll talk maybe a little bit later on about blood tests, because one of the themes, if you like, of the first time you were on was people taking personal responsibility for their own health, and maybe, you know, tracking things themselves, and you know, looking at what they can do themselves rather than relying on the NHS or someone else to kind of fix them or help them out, you know, and what we can do.
Yeah, the thing is, James, a lot of these serious health conditions are silent, and by the time you know about it, it's too late. You know, so tracking it now, and like you said, for £30 or whatever, it is well worth it. Or even doing an annual blood check independently that goes possibly into more depth would be even more beneficial than when you leave it until you have a mini stroke or chest pain or whatever. It's too late by then.
So the questions, if we because there's a kind of a theme around, there's quite a lot of questions around cholesterol and statins,
Yes.
which is obviously a kind of a common treatment for that. And when I did my blood test recently, like I said, my LDL was high, but the ratio was normal, and things like that. But there's questions. So I'll give you a few questions, and you can kind of tackle them in the order you think makes most sense. Does a cholesterol over 5 mean that you need to do something? What about hereditary cholesterol? So where you have a history of high cholesterol in the family, but when your parent had a poor lifestyle and you don't, how much impact does dietary cholesterol have on the number of, you know, the actual amount of cholesterol you have in your body? And does your cholesterol number naturally increase with age? And then also there was a question around, a kind of a general question around statins as well. So they're all obviously linked, but whichever way you want to kind of tackle this is, you know, it's up to you, Nancy.
Okay, so the holy grail that we use in British UK medicine is online. It's a tool we use. It's called the Q-Risk3 factor. And it's online. It's called qrisk3.org. So if anybody online's got their phone, just pop in Google qrisk3.org, and that is a tool where we stratify your risk of having a stroke or a cardiovascular disease according to your age, your family history background. If anybody below the age of 60 has had it, that again increases your risk. If you take alcohol, you're at higher risk, for example, if you have erectile dysfunction in men, people with severe mental health disease as well. People are unfortunately, for example, asthmatics who have to take a high dose of steroids frequently, people with rheumatological conditions where they have to have medication that controls their immune system. So all this is punched into this according to your age, your date of birth, and sadly, your postcode as well. Do you know when they talk about postcode lottery? That affects your, so apparently if you live in a poorer socioeconomic status area, that increases your risk of having a heart attack or a stroke. So if you were to actually Google Q-Risk3, that's when you go to your doctor and they punch in. So this actual tool is integrated in the NHS software. So you walk into your doctor's, you do a blood test, then you get your follow-up appointment. So the doctor will sit there, integrate your data into that. We already know what your age, your date of birth is, your postcode, and then it comes up with a number. The magic number is 10. So if you're Q-Risk, so after this, you can all do your I'd recommend you do your Q-Risk3 after this this discussion. If your magic number is above 10, that means you do have a high risk above 10% of having, over the next 10 years, of some sort of adverse cardiovascular event or stroke. So that's when we would go in and recommend you start a statin. It's evidence-based. and science-based, and that's a tool we would approach. Now, it doesn't really apply if you already are a diabetic, because your risk is high anyway. If you've already had a heart attack, your risk is high anyway. But for people who haven't had all of that, where you're at a position of reversing the risk factors and improving it. So even though, Peter, James, your LDL is high, but you exercise, you eat healthy, you'd be surprised if you put your Q risk in there, and I don't know what your alcohol consumption's like, etc.
Yes, alcohol's very low. Don't smoke. Don't do any
Your
drugs
Q
and that
risk,
sort of stuff.
well, that's excellent, because smoking is a very, very important lifestyle factor. Your Q risk would be less than 10. So the actual numbers need to be put in context, and that context is what the tool that is recommended by NICE, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, and that's what we use to evaluate what your risk is. So again, it's a desktop thing everybody, all your listeners can use today. And if anybody out there has found that their Q risk is high, even you can actually put your Q risk in without your actual data of your latest LDL and HDL and triglycerides, and you can find out what it is. And if it's high, you need to go and have a conversation with your doctor. So
that's really helpful. So QRisk3.org.
yeah, .org.
And is it the number 3, or spell the word out 3?
The number 3.
The number 3, yeah.
We'll put a link in the notes, because Nancy said you sent it to me on. I've done it. I just did it just before we came on. You sent it to me. So,
okay. Did you do your own Q risk, Peter?
Yeah. It came out about 3%, I think.
So excellent. Well, there you go. You're 10,000 steps a day, so you are low risk.
Which this is interesting, because when I was 40, so what's that, 8 or 9 years ago, you get a check, don't you, at the doctor, and I had my fasting cholesterol done and what have you. I had it all done, and actually I was experimenting with fasting at the time. So I went to the doctors to get the check, and she said, "Oh, we should have told you so we could do a fasted blood test." And I was like, "Well, I haven't eaten anything today yet, and I hadn't eaten since dinner the night before." So the interest, I'd actually been out for dinner the night before to a tapas restaurant as well. So I've been eating chorizo and all sorts. Anyway, but that didn't matter. So I had my blood drawn. She tested it anyway with a pinprick as well, and said, "Oh, it's come out. It came out about 3%, something like that." Then they sent it off for tests, and then I got a text message, I think, from the doctor, from the nurse at the doctor, saying you need to make an appointment. And I was like, "Oh, bugger. Yeah, your results are in. You need to make an appointment." And I was like, "Right, that doesn't sound good." I went in, saw the doctor. She put the number in, and it went down to like 2.3% or something, right? But my cholesterol number, this is why I'm asking about the number 5, because my overall number was I can't remember what it was, but it was high or higher than that. But it actually made it go down. So she was saying, "I don't know why you're here." But then she did also say, "However, in about 5 or 6 years' time, we might have to talk about statins, because you'll be at that age." And I was like, I don't understand that. So I wasn't happy about that, but I was happy with the fact that it was a really low number. So as in
I'm exactly the same, Peter. My cholesterol, drum roll, is 7.5. The last time I checked.
Oh no, we better finish this conversation quickly, because you might.
No, but my Q risk is 2.5. So my GP said, "Nancy, do continue doing whatever you're doing. You don't need to start a statin or anything." So mine's
7.28.
Well, join the 7 club.
But like you say, if your overall Q risk is below 10,
yes,
then you shouldn't just be stuck on statins.
You shouldn't actually need to start a statin if you're not diabetic, or if you actually haven't got high blood pressure, you haven't had a cardiovascular event. Yes, if your statin's high, then you need to work on your lifestyle. So like exercise more, walk more. I don't know what more I could do, but I think, it doesn't necessarily mean that, according to the Q risk, that I need to start a statin, and I'm at high risk of anything else. So
that's interesting, because the question about the 5 was mine, and I'm asking for a specific reason, because my partner Sean is menopausal and that, and her cholesterol's elevated apparently, but it's probably similar to yours. It might even be less. and they've spoke about statins with her, and she eats what I eat, and she walks like I walk, and that she doesn't lift weights or anything like that, which she probably should, but I'm not going to tell her that. It's she'll figure that out for herself. But she's really worried about what it looks like in 10 years time or 20 years time, which is also the thing of, does it increase? I know it can increase with menopause, it can increase with age apparently, but there's this number in my head definitely, which is 5, and I don't know where that comes from.
I'll explain. So you go to your doctor, we get a panel of blood tests, anything. So the normal biochemically, but obviously you're not a test tube. So the test tube laboratory standardized ratio would be less than 5 millimoles per liter. That's where the 5 comes from. But then we take that 5 and put it in context of where you are in life, what your lifestyle is, and etc. And it's that context where we calculate your risk. So in an ideal world, it should be less than 5. But if my risk is less than, is 2.5%, it doesn't really mean clinically that I'm at risk of having a cardiovascular event or a stroke and etc. So so it's a difference between a biochemical lab result and the context of it in real life. So I would share the Q risk free factor with her, which can put it in and then see what it is. And then she can go back to her doctor who said, well, actually, here's my Q risk, doctor. So there you go.
Put that in your pipe and smoke.
And that might actually settle her mind as well, Pete, mightn't it? If she does the Q risk and it comes out like under 10, which
because I'm giving away
the
the whole family history here, but she gets worried because her dad's diabetic, but he's type 2 diabetic and he's got a terrible diet. He's very sporty, he's coached sport his whole life, but he eats so many carbs, it's unbelievable. Like he's one of those people who's up and down on the carb thing, so he's eating all day long.
Well, you know what? I'm glad you've mentioned carbs, because we haven't actually discussed triglycerides. And I think triglycerides are such a high indicator as well, a predictive factor of having some sort of adverse event. So what are triglycerides? Everybody talks about cholesterol, but what about triglycerides? They're another precursor as well of metabolic disease, like fatty acid, for example, like a liver disease, where you can get non-alcoholic liver disease due to excess triglycerides. So what are triglycerides? If you think of them, they're like little packets of fat that your body utilizes for energy. So, and they come from carbs. So if you have too many carbs, your liver digests them and it puts them digests them into sugars, glucose. So if you have like pasta, wheat, too many carbs, and then into fats, the fatty acids. And then if you eat more than what your body needs, all these fatty acids join up and become glycerol. And then the glycerol is converted into, which is a type of a sugar alcohol. And that's what increases your triglycerides. So triglycerides are also quite a good indicator of how bad your diet is. So if you've got high triglycerides, that means you really need to cut back on your carbs. So even though my cholesterol was 7.5, my triglycerides were really low. They were 0.3. Because I do have a low carb diet. So that was more of a reassurance, and that helped me keep my Q risk factor at the 2.5%. So your father-in-law, Peter, it's a shame that he, even though he exercises, the other parts of the equation is having, you are what you eat. It's fuel. You're fueling your body. You need to put in the right amount of food, which is again low carb. And I really love high protein, that because it's more satiating and etc. It feeds the muscles, all the amino acids. So that's and it keeps your Q risk down.
Well, he's how old is he? 75 or something, and he won't be told. He just won't. So he's not a lost cause. That sounds horrible, but it's not. That's not going to happen. But she really worries about it, because she's like, well, that's another thing. Is it hereditary? Because it's just like, well, it's in the family, and his cholesterol's like 3, but he's on statins. But that's because his diet. All of these things. This is what she's really worried about. I'm like, he has got these risks. Therefore, he is. This is where my head is now. I couldn't tell her this before. I couldn't explain it to her because I don't know. But it's like, well, he's diabetic. He's older as well. And like all of everything you've just said there makes sense. And it's like, that is why he is at that point. And this is why you won't be at that point if you live like you do
Exactly.
now.
My dad was a type 2 diabetic, and it put the fear of God in me, like seeing him inject insulin, and I just didn't want to do that. So you can have a hereditary legacy, but change your genotype by what you eat. You can reprogram your gut microbiome, your lifestyle, and reduce your risk. So had I continued to have a high sugar diet, high carb diet, high triglycerides. So your father-in-law, if you think of him, he's type 2 diabetic. His cholesterol's low artificially due to the statin, but then he's got high triglycerides. He probably has fatty liver disease as well. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, probably looking
Yeah,
from what you're
possibly.
telling me. But if her lifestyle, if her BMI is healthy, her visceral fat is low, she isn't it. So she needs to do the Q risk, see what the number is, and happy days, she'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But I must
'Cause-
throw something in there. Speaking of medic, statins aren't the demon. If your Q risk is above 10, then you're goosed. You really are. What that would tell us is that, for example, there was a study that was published in 2022 in the the Journal of American Medical Association, the JAMA. They did a study on 130,000 people, and they showed that statins will reduce the risk of having a heart attack by 38% in the first year.
Wow. Okay.
A stroke by 24% if your Q risk is above 10%. So they're a lifesaver, which is why you go to your doctor, they punch the number in, and sometimes, like your father-in-law, he probably has to be on a statin because he's already a type 2 diabetic. So metabolically, unfortunately, it's a lifesaver for him.
So
Yeah.
do statins, I mean, is this something that, because I kind of hear that once you go on something like a statin, you're on it for the rest of your life, or when you go on certain medications, they just keep you on it for the rest of your life. Is that
It's a
true, or is there a way to kind of,
really, really good question, James. And to go back to what Peter said, let's take your father-in-law, Peter, as a classic, stereotypical 75-year-old bloke. What did you say about him? He won't listen. He won't change his diet, will he?
No, not at all.
So to answer your question, Joe, if somebody's like Peter's father-in-law, then he's just going to be in it because he just won't change his ways. He won't listen. But if it's somebody who's willing to, and I've had a chap actually, he was only ever one patient. A year ago, he was on something like 7 different tablets. He was on a statin, he was on blood pressure tablets, he was on water tablets, he was overweight, his BMI, and then he walked in 12 months later and he was slim and tall. And I looked at him and, you could see that I was speechless. My jaw, what's happened? Because he looked so slim. As well, I've had a midlife change of life. Well, he got divorced, he found a new partner, he changed his eating style, he brought his type 2 diabetes into remission by eating healthy, and he's lost about 3 or 4 stone in weight, slim, fit. He walked every day, and he said, "Doctor, my blood pressure's fine now. My blood sugars are fine now. Do I need to be on these medications?" His cholesterol was fine. And looked, I tried to find a reason to keep him on the meds, and I couldn't justify it. So he walked out, and I'd sort of just stop. I said, if anything changes, you might have to go back. So does that answer your question? That if you do implement the lifestyle advice, and lifestyle factors is so important, it dictates literally your future health and your lifespan. So they're 2 opposite ends of the spectrum, and it is so easy to dictate and control your future health by just walking and clean eating and exercising like we were in the cave. We used to have to hunt for 3 days to find food, but now in the modern day era, we don't really. You just go press an app and it actually arrives to your door without making any effort of hunting. And it's just, we're in this carb overload, and it's just easy, and it's damaging our health.
That's the thing, because we've spoke about this with various people before about training and things like that, but eating and people getting obese and stuff, and how that response, that innate kind of what do you call it? Whatever is in your body. So, you know, you get a little bit hungry and you start to panic and you want to eat. Because years ago it would have taken us 3 days to find something to eat or whatever. So it's like it's actually still in us, isn't it? Because we haven't evolved
That
after
is
that.
so. I tell my patients that, and you must I'm sure these skinny pens is a high street name now, but they do actually work on your brain, where they switch off that hunger hormone.
Mm.
We're geared since we were sort of used to live in the cave, where your body thinks there's no food, you get a bit hungry, you start storing food and overeating, because they know that you might be at risk of having, going into a famine, and you'll spend 3 days hunting for food. So unfortunately, food is so abundant, so ultra processed, so available and unhealthy, that unfortunately we are becoming an obese society.
This is, it's not, it's sort of linked, but I listened to a podcast yesterday. It was really interesting. It was a guy, it was a psychiatrist, or psychologist, psychiatrist. He did like a mindset guy type of thing, but he was focusing more on brain health than
Yes.
actually doing mindfulness stuff. Because you can do all the mindfulness stuff, but if you're still eating rubbish, not exercising and all that, it's just not gonna. He's like, no. If people look at bone density and muscle mass and all that, you look at the organ, you look at the thing. With the brain, people tend to look at what you think and your thoughts and all of that. But it was actually like, well, look at the health of the brain. The brain's the organ. If you can keep the brain healthy,
Absolutely.
the thoughts and stuff like that, it'll just become a better place to be, sort of thing. It was really interesting.
Your brain healthy, that muscle brain connection, when you activate it every time you exercise, you're stimulating your brain, you're just calming it down, and you're actually increasing your health span and your brain span. We talked about it the last episode. It's so important, and it just elevates your mood.
It's so interesting. There was some of the stuff you've been saying, Nancy. There's a quote we've spoke about it before on the podcast, and I'm not sure the origins, but it's kind of that genetics loads the gun and lifestyle pulls the trigger. So
I love that. I've not heard of that. That is so true.
So you may have this genetic predisposition towards obesity or type 2 diabetes or whatever, but that pre-genetic disposition will only manifest itself if the conditions are correct. So if your lifestyle is really, really good, so many people say, oh, well, I've got a history of, it's like when we had Dave Whitley on, wasn't it? I've got a history of diabetes and obesity in my family. And he said, yeah, but we've also got a history of like eating loads of cake, and so it's the kind of the culture and the lifestyle that they have. So
the word for that is epigenetics, James.
Yes.
You can actually program your epigenetics, and you can actually change them with your lifestyle. So you can become healthier. I personally am healthier than when I was in my 20s. I found my 20s one of the most stressful decades of my life. I was like medical school, junior doctor, doing 48-hour shifts on call. It was just awful. I was just living to exist and get out of student debt and living on vouchers. It was really dire. But yeah, it was hard. But when you're older, you have more time intentionally to exercise. I didn't have time to exercise when I was I just didn't. I'd walk around, but did I intentionally have, with the amount of exams and qualifications I didn't have time to exercise.
So just before we kind of move on from the general kind of cholesterol, I just wanted to ask you, because what we've spoke about there is the total cholesterol number, which you said about 5 or under 5. And I've got a little chart on my blood test results that have come back, and up to 5 is green. And then like after 5 is sort of amber. And like I say, I was on 7.28. So that's the total cholesterol. And then there's a total cholesterol stroke HDL ratio, which is normal. And then there's, like I say, then just scrolling through this, sorry, the HDL is optimal. So my HDL cholesterol is down as optimal. The LDL is down as high. Yeah. So what is obviously the main number that you use, the total cholesterol, is that number that's relating to the 5. But where do those other kind of results fit into the bigger picture?
We fit them into the Q-risk calculator.
Okay.
we come out with the risk over 10 years of you having and the percentage risk. So again, I'm back into out of the test tube and into the lab and into how that impacts you as a person and context of that. So do the Q risk, James, and just share it later on. It'd be
oh no, that'd be great. No, that would be
yes.
yeah, that'd be fantastic. So in essence, just to kind of summarize, if I can, statins are not bad.
Nope.
But there may be, would you say that they're used maybe more frequently or more quickly than they should be used in some cases?
No, science, medicine it's a science. It's something we measure. We would have done thousands of tests. It's very accurate and precise. So, and it's evidence-based. So based on that formula, in context of who you are, where you are, your gender, your risk factors, alcohol, smoking, etc., that is all taken into account.
So it all comes down to that Q risk 3 score.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that's amazing, because I know that someone, one of the members at the gym, after the last time you were on, you talked about those sticks that you kind of wee on, and then they tell you if you've got sugar in your urine. And they went and bought loads of sticks and did that, and like you say, Pete went and bought one of the rings and he's using that. And I think that Q risk thing is really great. I mean, and that's something that everyone can do.
And it's free.
For free online.
It's great.
But this is what's good about it as well, because even if a doctor is like my doctor said to me, we might have to talk about statins in 5 or 6 years because of your age. You know, I was like, well,
you go back to him and say,
I don't think so, but yeah, we can go back and say
why. You know, he wouldn't. He probably wouldn't. You'll both be on the same hymn sheet, so there won't be any discussion there.
No, exactly. Yeah, I like that.
Excellent.
But also very quickly, because another thing Sean did as soon as this thing came back was, as soon as she'd been to the doctor and your cholesterol's high and everything, is she stopped eating cheese and she stopped like all of this stuff. And I was like, it's fine. It is fine. You know, it'd be like, we'd be having something and I'd be like, do you want a bit of cheese on that? She'd be like, no, thanks. I'm cutting that out and I'm cutting this out. And
she's doing what she's been told. Yeah.
But how much so this is the thing, and you've spoke about this a little bit already about eating lots of carbs or something, and it you know, your liver produces cholesterol, doesn't it, and all of that. So how much does actually what you eat, and I mean in terms of, people think of things like cheese and yogurt and like, well, dairy and
eggs,
prawns and eggs and I mean, we spoke about eggs last time. I mean, I load up on eggs.
Of course, but you are what you eat. I will say, you can't sort of exercise and do X, Y, and then just eat McDonald's. You are still at high risk. You're really messing up your body metabolically, and believe it or not, there are a lot of some of my patients are stick thin, and they've got a really high cholesterol, and their Q risk is excessively high because it's that high. Like I had a former ballerina, and she was now in her 60s, and she was type 2 diabetic because her cholesterol was so high, and she burnt off the calories, but her metabolic consumption was, she wasn't fueling her body with the right amount of food, the right quality of food. So yes, so I'd switch to low fat cheese and low carbs. Carbs are really sort of I think the bane of a lot of things metabolically. They just raise your profile and your risk of everything. So if she does the Q risk, and switch to things like, if she can, low fat cheeses, and just so normal standard fat cheese is quite high, and oils. I think every household now has an air fryer. I'd stick to air fried food, grilled food generally as much as possible. And just clean, basic whole food diet.
Fresh fruit, fresh vegetables.
Back to when we were in the cave, literally, if you can't see it and catch it, then and farm it, then I won't eat it. And I like eating whole food.
Excellent. So the other questions we had was around, Pete, you've got it. Do you want to read it? It was around,
I've just had a vision now of people. Nancy said, if you can't catch it, so there'll be people chasing Uber drivers around all over the place. I caught him, so now I can eat that. Anyway, not Uber drivers.
The kidney one, I think.
Not Uber drivers. You know what I mean.
Just Eat and Deliveroo and those.
Yeah, them ones.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So, question from James. It's quite a long one, but we'll stick with me.
Fire away.
James, who suffers from kidney failure, undertakes PD dialysis, but was otherwise in fairly good health. He goes to the gym, and his kidney team are fine with him exercising, and he's sensible with loads. So purely from a health perspective, when it comes to weight training, is there a minimum effective dose, or does the Pareto principle apply, i.e. putting 20% of effort gets 80% of results?
Well, first of all, we need to celebrate James. Like, wow. James, he's got kidney failure and he's on PD. So what is PD? It's something called peritoneal dialysis. What's that? So he has to go on dialysis every single day of his life. He's not on one of those machines where you go into the hospital, get hooked up, and your blood gets changed once a week. This is a daily thing. There's two types. There's continuous dialysis. Sorry about that. There's continuous dialysis that happens overnight over a course of 8 to 10 hours. And there is also ambulatory dialysis where he gets hooked up and it happens in his tummy, where they put the exchange solution to clear out all the toxins, and he gets an exchange 3 or 4 times a day. And each time he does a cycle, it lasts about between 30 to 40 minutes. So I just want you to 1 minute, just for a second there, put yourself in James's shoes and the commitment James has to being healthy. And on top of the burden of doing that, he hasn't resigned and said, oh no, I've got this, I'm not going to bother. He's actually making a daily effort to weight train and be healthy. I really admire his mindset, because I worked on a dialysis ward when I was a junior doctor, and I've never come across anybody like James. So I'd love to, James, reach out to us, tell us more. It's quite inspirational.
What can we say? We have great listeners, don't we? It's just the way it goes.
Really awesome. What a guy. Wow. If you could send in a picture, you need to
yeah, well, we'll get him on.
As a medic. I am talking as a medic, so kudos to James. So to answer his question, he's in a unique situation. He's beyond my sort of expertise as a journalist to advise him. He has to really consult his renal team what would work with him, but I don't know what his renal function's like. I'm not a renal specialist, but generally speaking, obviously there are benefits to exercising. I wouldn't be able to answer that question, to be very honest, regarding somebody who has kidney failure. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, no, because that's a very specific question for a very specific person, and like you say, you can't give general advice to something so specific. But like you say, well done to James. And like you say, he is obviously consulting regularly with this team of specialists. So
like you've said as well, it's like you can't give advice, but like on that specific thing. However, wanting to carry on in that situation is
he is like, a real hero and trooper.
Yeah,
you need to interview him. I don't
know who it is, so we're throwing it out there now. Get in touch, James, and we'll have you on.
Please do. Wow.
No, that's great. And
having said that though, and this is connected, but there's a lady who comes on. So I've got a walking group, and there's a lady who comes on that, and it's not from walking, specific, like only. Because she did change her diet and lifestyle and things like that, and she goes to the gym and everything. But I think I mentioned it on the last podcast. She was at stage 3 of kidney failure.
Okay.
And she's in her 60s, and she changed her diet and lifestyle, and she came walking with us. She's done 70 or 80 walks with us, and she's one of the people who leads the walks now and stuff. She's lost 35 kilos in weight.
Wow.
She had like a lot of stress before this, so she's changed her life and everything. She's in her 60s, so she's at an age and a weight and everything where it could be like, there's nothing I can do. She goes to the doctors every January, specifically about her kidneys, her kidney function, and it's like stage 3 every year until this year when she went in January, stage 2. So I was like, that is amazing. So it's gone backwards.
But also, there are caveats again. If you go and get your kidney function tested, please make sure, and this is advice to all the listeners, on the day of your phlebotomy test, when you have your appointment, make sure you will have drank 2 litres of water before your test. Because if you go in, let's say you did a session at the gym, rocked up at the phlebotomist, did a blood test, you will be dehydrated, and that will be impacted and reflected on your blood test, and you might be wrongly diagnosed. So clearly she's made an effort in changing her lifestyle, hydrating, drinking more water, flushing your kidneys out, and etc. And this is it. She's changed her epigenetics by changing her lifestyle. And that's a classic example and illustration of what lifestyle can do and how you can reverse disease by doing that.
Because there was no it wasn't hereditary. There was no what do you call it? Not evidence. I'm forgetting words today. I'm having one of those days. But it wasn't in our family. Put it that way.
Okay.
So it happened to her. It's probably through stress.
Yeah.
So she's reversed it by just being less
Well,
stressed.
if you think of the classic person and classic office worker, they you're up at 6:30, you're in front of your office between 8:30 and 9, and then you sat drinking tea and coffee all day. You're lucky if you get half an hour's break, or sometimes asked to work out through your lunch break, and then you go home at 5. Have you had time to drink 3 litres of water or 2 litres in that working window? Even if you're at home, you're on your Zoom call, hybrid working all day. Do you get time to actually drink and flush your kidneys out? You probably don't, especially if you're in a cold, like in the UK, from September to April, you won't get thirsty. And it's hard work and it's effort to drink water. So this is where it's different. Whereas she's out walking, she's challenging herself, she's getting thirsty, and she's probably drinking and flushing her kidneys out. So unless you make a conscious effort in drinking water, your kidneys will pay the price.
You can actually buy things now, can't you? Like bottles and stuff, which will text you. Or
Do they? Oh, okay.
there's like there's somebody
to remind you, yeah.
They text you or the beep, or they send you some sort of message, or they make your phone buzz, or something. There's some sort of technology within them that remind you to drink water. I'm like,
I mean, back when in my 20s, I was bad. I didn't have time. You had a pager, and we'd walk in at work. I was working in a hospital, like the junior doctor, over 6 floors, and it was a crash call here, this, there. I never had time to drink. I was chronically dehydrated. But I suppose at that age I could get away with it, but I couldn't now. If I sort of abused my body like that, I would be paying for it. Definitely.
Can we talk then as well? There was one thing, again, this is something obviously that a lot of the listeners are people in their, their 40s, their 50s, and maybe older. And one of the things on this blood test that I got back as well was a PSA number.
Yeah.
The prostate specific antigen.
Yes.
And up to, and mine came back, it says normal or raised, but it was, I think the green line on the graph goes up to like 1.4 or something like that. And mine was 3.27. But something you mentioned earlier was I did this as like I paid for this test and I went somewhere to get it, but I didn't really get briefed before. But because a lot of men obviously who listen to this podcast will be in their 40s or 50s, and sort of prostate health and things like that, and his PSA number, which I've heard of before, but don't know much about, to be honest. But you said if you're going to have like a test, you should avoid doing certain things and do other things before the test, otherwise it can skew your reading.
Yeah. Well, first, there are certain criteria. For example, you make sure you haven't had a water infection 3 weeks before getting your PSA tested. Also, riding a bike, because obviously you're directly putting pressure on your prostate gland. So if you're riding a bike about a week beforehand, that might give you an artificial false positive. And we always say not to have intercourse to a minimum of 2 days before having the blood test done. And also, again, it needs to be put into context. If you sort of will have, let's say you went on a bike ride and 3 days later did a PSA, you might be in that grey zone, and that might give you an alarming false positive, thinking, oh my God, do I have cancer, etc. But also there's risk factors, for example, family history. So if somebody has a family history of having a high PSA, then it's worth tracking it every year. Your doctor should do that. You should approach your GP, but the caveat is not to have a water infection 3 weeks prior to that, because that affects it artificially. You get a false positive. Cycling, bike riding, and then obviously having intercourse. So if yours was borderline, slightly marginally high, perhaps one of those criteria may have applied.
Yeah, two of those things kind of I didn't do. So, or I
So
did do, you know what I mean? So within that time. So, no, do you know what I mean?
I wouldn't worry. It's not, and there's no family history, is there, James?
No.
So you're probably absolutely fine.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's interesting though. And then I suppose the thing we were going to talk about maybe is this because Pete messaged me the other day, didn't you, about these
Yeah.
blood tests? Because I listen to a lot of sort of like more health and strength and fitness podcasts, but quite a few of them are kind of, American based and things like that. And I think they've got far more of a culture of getting blood tests done and getting your blood panels and your hormone panels and seeing all of this stuff. Whereas in this country, I don't know. I mean, within the NHS, they don't do as a standard these kind of thorough blood panels and things, do they? Or would you really have to request it? Or
No, we do. I mean, British medicine is very different to European and American medicine. We are more evidence-based, whereas in America, it's all private, isn't it? So before anything, they'll get a full body MRI. It doesn't cost the doctor anything, and it's detracted from clinical skills and etc. Whereas we are, it's a free service we operate in the UK, and it's more of a social based. So we go on evidence-based medicine. So yes, but there are certain things there's a lot you can do, but it's all evidence-based medicine. So certainly get your cholesterol profile done, your thyroid done, your renal functions are very, very important. The doctor will do that free of charge. Your HbA1c, which is your sort of, it's diagnostic of diabetes or where you are, if you're borderline or etc. Your triglycerides reflects metabolic disease, the precursor of that having non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. For women, thyroid as well. For women, we don't actually check. This is very different to European and American medicine. For women, for example, they will check their estrogen levels. In the UK, we don't. And there's a reason why you don't do that, is because it fluctuates if you're in the perimenopause. So let's say we took it when it's high, you'll get a false negative. So they'll say, oh no, it's high today, you're not in the menopause or perimenopause. But actually, what if, let's say in 3 days' time, it's low again? So we don't actually check your estrogen level in the menopause or perimenopause. Whereas in America, they do so many tests. I hear, like when I see on social media, oxidized lipoproteins. I've never even heard of it. We don't actually test these things in the UK. It's different. So our medicine's different. We are more sort of pragmatic, link it to your risk of disease, etc. Whereas I don't know, they come up with all sorts of formula and ideas, and it sells, doesn't it? It's all about generating money and income. Whereas here, it's more about healthcare. And I will say, I'm sure you've heard on the news about 2 weeks ago, we are the only country in the world that is offering for free for eligible patients skinny pens on the government. The people who are eligible. Not one single country in the Western world offers that. That's how much the NHS cares about. Yes, you have to fit certain criteria, but for people who are at risk, they can get it for free.
So like you mentioned, HbA1c. So I've got loads. Everything is pretty much normal on there, so would you recommend, like you say, but with kind of, you can do these things privately now, and I did. I mean, is there a benefit? Like you said, I know you're all about tracking and numbers and knowing where you are with things.
Yes.
More data is, I know you said maybe in America they might go a bit over the top on loads of data that maybe is not relevant or has a purpose, but would you say the more data you can have, the clearer picture you've got. So then, would you see that as a good thing, or?
I think so. There's certain tests, like, for example, the FIT test, the stool test for cancers. Now, in the UK, unless you're of a certain age, you won't get offered it every 3 years. But we're finding more and more younger people getting bowel cancer. And if you've heard of the FIT test, you can buy it online, I think less than £50. And it's a stool test that has an accuracy of 99.6% accuracy of detecting bowel cancer. So unless you've got certain concerns and you go to your GP and you're eligible, but I think, why not get a bowel cancer test? You never know. A lot of these conditions are actually silent and asymptomatic. And by the time you've got symptoms, it could be too late.
And we've mentioned, I think you mentioned last time as well, like things like DEXA scans, which obviously you can do privately. Now we've had a guy on a couple of times on the podcast, Owen from My Vital Metrics in London, that has a clinic that does, you can have a DEXA scan, which gives you all your bone density, your muscle mass, your body fat percentages, all of that sort of stuff through a DEXA.
Well, again, medically on the NHS, we do something called a Q risk score. And that would tell you what your risk of having a fragility fracture is. And based on that, whether you're high risk or low, then you'd get a DEXA scan. But your body composition, probably, I don't know if that's the one you were referring to. I think that's really handy to have. Your visceral fat, we don't actually measure the visceral fat, and that is such a high predictor of metabolic disease like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So visceral fat is, I think, something we don't track in the NHS. And I think on a body analysis machine, which you can buy again on Amazon for whatever price, I think that's really important to track. So I sort of managed to bring mind, when I went through the perimenopause, I put on a stone in weight, and my visceral fat went up to 8. But I've been tracking that, and I've brought it right down to virtually 0 now. So it's a good metabolic predictor of adverse disease.
So this DEXA that I've done it a few times up there, and it does give you, because I think on the NHS when you go through a DEXA, the reason they really do that is for the bone density, isn't it? It's for the osteoporosis risk and all the rest of it. But when you get the full body composition done on the DEXA as well. So but again, like they say, someone like, if I went into my doctor and asked for a DEXA scan, it's not a wise use of NHS funds, So in that, but for less than £100, you can kind of pay and go and have it done properly somewhere. So again, it's down to, I suppose, that personal responsibility and how much interest you show in it. And if you want to pay out, a lot of these things, like you say, they're not hugely expensive. I mean, I know they are for some people if you're really, really tight, tight for money, but it's only something you might do annually, and it might cost £70 or something, so that's interesting.
Or even just an analysis, body, the scales that
The
actually
body
do
stat
analysis.
type things.
Fat percentage, visceral fat, your skeletal muscle mass, your bone mass. It's really good to just track those and add it in, layer in your blood pressure, your heart rate, how many hours you're sleeping, your oxygen sats. It's all very, very helpful to see your biometric data. Plug it into the Q risk, plug it into all these different tools, and it's fantastic. The FRAX index, sorry, that's the one for bone density, FRAX. So it's www.frax.org, and that will tell you what your risk of having a fragility fracture is, but that's predominantly for women or men, for example, if they had steroid use through inhalers or having an autoimmune disease or whatever. So
excellent. No, this has been great. And after this, I know I'm going to go and do my Q risk 3 score and find that out, because that's been brilliant. Any other questions, Pete, before we start to wrap up?
No,
because that's been really interesting.
That was all it. What has been brilliant there is I know a hell of a lot more about statins and cholesterol now than I did.
And you're cool that you're on the same page as your doctor. So yeah,
that's cool. So no, that's really interesting. That Q risk thing is great because, like I say, I did it earlier. I don't know what my cholesterol numbers are, so when I get my blood work done, that'll be there. But it's just interesting to know, because then you can just use that whenever. It's like the calorie counters and all of this sort. When people are like, I don't know how many calories I'm meant to eat, and it's like, just plug it into there's calculators everywhere. Plug it in, it'll give you a rough number, and then go with that. And then if it doesn't work, just change it slightly. And it's,
honestly, if anybody uses a Q risk and goes into their GP talking Q risk language, my God, they will really sort of what did you hear about Q risk? What?
Well, there'll be at least 5 more people now.
And then they can say, well, I heard it on the Health Oddity podcast with
exactly.
Dr. Nancy Allen.
My patients comes to me, I'll know where they've heard it from.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Dr. Nancy Allen, that has been superb talking to you again. That has been really, really lovely. And we will definitely speak to you again, because I love this, maybe once every few months, just catching up with you and just talking about, whatever's going on in people's lives, maybe whatever hot topics, in the media around health and things. It's just really, really good to be able to talk to you for an hour. And get your opinions and experience, and hear the science, and I think that's great. qrisk3.org. And just again, like I said at the start, but on Instagram at gpdirectonline.co.uk. And is that really where you'd like people to go, Nancy?
Yeah, it'd be lovely. I need to post more, but yes, that'll be my goal for this summer. I'll be posting more, hopefully. I'm too busy in clinic, but I need to put myself out there.
No, well, I said that to people because I sort of said, oh, you are on Instagram, but you're really busy doing the job that you're doing, so it's not like you're, but that shows that you are, you are a working doctor, with, like we said, 25 years experience. You're not sat on social media all day, you're out there dealing with patients and actually doing this stuff in real life, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on our 5th birthday episode.
Oh, it's been awesome, and have a lovely summer.
Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching, listening. Please do leave a review if you're watching or listening on a platform that allows you to do so, especially Apple Podcasts. Give us a subscribe on YouTube as well. We will be back next week with episode 261. Not 100% sure on the guest yet. We are just finalizing a couple of people. So, but we will be back next week. Thank you, Nancy.
It's a pleasure. It's been absolutely awesome, guys.
Brilliant. Oh, and I did want to ask, you made a comment on Facebook. You said you're looking forward to joining the dynamic duo again, which is Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
Which one's Batman and which one's Robin? I've got lots of Batman stuff around me. Don't worry. Anyway,
some Batman music in the background next time.
Yes. Brilliant.
Yeah, we'll do that. I might put that on at the end.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Pete.
Have a great summer. Bye.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Excellent.
You've been listening to Health Oddity with Peter Lant and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthoddity.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Oddity.